My mother raised her glass at Thanksgiving like she was blessing the whole family. Then she smiled at my sister Allison and said, "One daughter became a doctor." Everyone clapped. Then her eyes slid to me. The other became a maid. 14 relatives laughed so hard the candles shook. I sat there with a pumpkin pie cooling on the counter and my hands folded like I was the hired help. But when Mom stood up to toast Allison a second time, I didn't lower my eyes. I pushed back my chair. And what I said next made my father drop his fork onto the plate. Before I tell you how we got there, tap like and tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and if you've ever had to defend your dignity at your own family table. Share what you would have done, because on nights like that, even one stranger's advice can make you feel less alone. In my mother's house, daughters were sorted before dinner was even served. Allison was sent to the living room. I was sent to the kitchen. When we were kids, she sat on the carpet with report cards in her lap while relatives leaned over her like she was a tiny miracle. Straight A's, science fair ribbons, honor roll certificates stuck to the fridge with apple-shaped magnets. I stood at the sink with dish soap up to my wrists, listening to everyone say that Allison is going places. Then Mom would call out, "Jenny, honey, bring more napkins." She said it sweetly. That was the trick. It never sounded cruel enough to fight. By 34, I had built a life nobody at that table wanted to understand. I ran a small high-end cleaning service. I managed schedules, clients, payroll, supplies, insurance, all of it. I had employees who depended on me and customers who booked weeks ahead. I had bought my own place in Columbus without asking my parents for anything but to my mother. None of that ever translated into success. A doctor had a title. I had a mop. That Thanksgiving, I almost didn't go. I sat in my car outside a grocery store with the heater blowing against my legs, staring at a pumpkin pie in a plastic container on the passenger seat. I had meant to bake one, but one of my employees had a family emergency that morning, and I spent 3 hours rearranging holiday cleanings so nobody lost a day's pay. When I walked into my parents' house, it smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, and my mother's perfume. "Store-bought," Mom said, glancing at the pie. "It's from that bakery section you like," I said. She smiled without touching it. "Well, I guess you were too busy cleaning other people's houses to make something." Aunt Susan laughed softly from the hallway. Not a big laugh, just enough. I took off my coat and swallowed the words pressing against my teeth. In the dining room, Allison was already glowing under the chandelier. Her white blazer hung over the back of her chair, and Mom kept touching it like it was a medal. Ryan, Allison's fiancé, sat beside her, smiling while Mom told everyone about hospital hours and residency and how proud a mother could be. My seat was the last one left, at the far end, near Uncle Gary and the wall. I set the pumpkin pie on the kitchen counter and looked through the doorway at the table. Already full, already arranged, already telling me where I belonged. Dinner started with the usual small talk, which in my family meant everyone talked around me, not to me. Allison told a story about a patient who had thanked her with a handwritten note. Ryan touched her shoulder while she spoke, proud and gentle, like he already knew he was marrying the brightest person in the room. Mom kept looking at him to make sure he was impressed. Dad carved turkey in slow, careful slices. Aunt Susan passed rolls. Cousin Tyler made some joke about hospital cafeteria food. Everybody had a place in the rhythm. I sat at the edge of it, cutting green beans into smaller pieces than anyone needed. Then Aunt Susan looked over and said, "Jenny, you must have the cleanest house in Columbus." A few people chuckled. I smiled because I knew how to survive small cuts. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice light, "most of my time goes into managing clients now. I have a team handling the field work." Mom waved her fork like she was brushing crumbs off the table. "Still cleaning, honey." There it was, not loud, not dramatic, just sharp enough to remind me that progress only counted if she respected the direction. I glanced at Dad. He heard it. I saw it in the way his jaw shifted, but he reached for the gravy instead. A few minutes later, Mom stood with her wine glass. The chandelier caught the rim, making it flash gold. "All right," she said, tapping the glass with her fork. "Before dessert, I want to say something. Everyone settled down. I already knew it would be about Allison. It was always about Allison. And a part of me could live with that. I loved my sister. I knew how hard she worked. Her success was not my enemy. Being erased beside it was. Mom turned toward Allison, eyes soft. One daughter became a doctor. Ryan smiled. Aunt Susan pressed a hand over her heart. Dad lifted his glass before Mom even finished. Then Mom looked at me. The other became a maid. For half a second, nobody moved. Then Tyler laughed into his mashed potatoes. Aunt Susan covered her mouth but laughed anyway. Uncle Gary made a short sound through his nose. Someone near the other end of the table said, "Well, somebody has to keep things spotless." And then the whole table loosened into laughter. 14 people. I counted because numbers were easier than feelings. Allison's smile flickered. She looked down at her plate, then at me, then away. Ryan stopped smiling, but he didn't know enough yet to understand the history sitting between us like an extra chair. Mom laughed too, light and pleased, like she had landed the perfect line. I gripped the napkin under the table until the fabric twisted into a tight white rope. It was just a joke. "Jenny," Mom said, before I had even spoken. That was the part that burned. She already knew it hurt. I swallowed it anyway. I told myself to get through dinner, get through dessert, get to my car, go home, breathe later. But after the pie was sliced and barely touched, Mom stood again. "Actually," she said, lifting her glass a second time, "I want to make one more toast to Allison." Dad raised his glass. So did everyone else. And I looked at that second glass going up, and my hand finally opened. My fingers let go of the napkin. It stayed there in my lap, twisted and wrinkled, like proof of everything I had been trying to hide. Mom was still standing. Her glass was lifted. Her smile had that polished, hostess shine she wore when company was watching. The same smile she used when she wanted the room to follow her lead before anyone had time to think. And I watched them follow. Dad's glass rose first. Aunt Susan's came up next, then Tyler's, then Gary's, one by one, like they were voting, not just for Allison, against me. I stared at my plate and saw every Thanksgiving layered on top of that one. Me carrying dishes from the kitchen while Allison showed someone her college acceptance letter. Me wiping gravy off the counter while Mom told relatives Allison was going to be somebody important. Me standing in my own little townhouse at 26, waiting for Mom to say she was proud, only for her to run one finger along my windowsill and say, "At least your line of work taught you something." People think humiliation is loud. Most of the time, it is quiet enough to be served with dinner. It is a laugh you are expected to join, a nickname you are supposed to outgrow being hurt by. A father who hears the insult and reaches for gravy. A sister who loves you. Maybe, but not enough to interrupt the comfort she gets from being chosen. Mom cleared her throat to continue. I looked at Allison's white blazer hanging over her chair. Clean, bright, admired. Then I looked down at my own hands, the faint dryness around my knuckles from years of work, the small scar near my thumb from a broken glass at a client's house years ago. Hands that had built a business, hands that signed paychecks, hands that mailed bills when my parents were short and too proud to ask twice. I had never brought those payments up, not because they were small, they weren't. Over the years, it had been enough to matter, enough to cover utilities, repairs, overdue balances, little emergencies my parents called temporary rough patches. I kept quiet because I thought dignity meant not embarrassing them, but sitting there, I finally understood something. I had been protecting their pride while they used mine for entertainment, Mom said. "Allison, sweetheart, you are every mother's dream of what a daughter can become." The words landed slowly. Every mother's dream. I looked at Dad. He was still holding his glass, but his eyes were on his plate. He knew. He knew what Jenny with the mop had done for this family. He knew how many times I had showed up when the dream daughter was too busy being praised to notice who was keeping things from falling apart. And he still lifted that glass. My chest stopped feeling tight. The heat in my face faded into something colder, clearer. I did not need to explain my whole life. I did not need to prove that cleaning was honest work. I did not need to ask these people to finally see me. I only needed to stop helping them pretend they had not seen me all along, so I picked up the napkin, smoothed it once across my knees, and placed it beside my plate. Then I pushed my chair back. The chair legs scraped across my mother's hardwood floor. It was not a loud sound, but it cut through the dining room sharper than her fork against the glass. Mom stopped mid-toast. Her smile stayed on her face for one extra second, like it had not gotten the message yet. Everyone turned. Not toward Allison, toward me. For once. I had the whole table. I stood with my hands at my sides, feeling the edge of my sweater brush against my wrists. My heart was beating hard enough that I could hear it under the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Mom blinked. Jenny. I looked at the glass in her hand. Go ahead, I said. Toast Allison again. Her eyebrows pulled together. You've already made it clear what kind of daughter she is. Aunt Susan shifted in her chair. Tyler looked down at his fork. Uncle Gary's phone was flat on the table now, screen dark. Mom gave a small laugh. Honey, sit down. We're having a nice dinner. No, I said. You're having a performance. The word landed badly. I saw it hit her first. Then Dad. Then Allison. Mom's mouth tightened. Excuse me. You toasted one daughter for becoming a doctor, I said. Then you called your other daughter a maid in front of 14 people, and everyone laughed because you laughed first. No one moved. A glass touched the table somewhere near the end, soft and guilty. Mom's cheeks colored. Jenny. It was a joke. That's what you always call it. My voice did not crack. That surprised me more than anything. You call it a joke when you say I clean up after people. You call it a joke when you ask if I'm here to help with dishes before I've even taken my coat off. You call it a joke when you turn my work into something small so Allison sounds bigger, Allison whispered. Jenny, I looked at her, but I did not attack her. I would not give my mother that escape. This isn't about hating Allison, I said. She worked hard. She deserves respect, but so do I. Mom set her glass down too fast. Wine trembled near the rim. You are being too sensitive, she said. There it was, the old key in the old lock, only this time. It did not open me. A joke is only a joke when the person you're cutting down gets to laugh too, I said. I have been smiling through this for years so you could pretend you weren't hurting me. Dad cleared his throat. Jenny, this isn't the time. I turned to him. His face changed before I even spoke. You raised your glass both times. He looked away. No, I said. Look at me. His eyes came back slowly, heavy with something that looked almost like shame. You knew what she meant. You heard it. You saw my face. And you still lifted that glass because it was easier to let me be humiliated than to make Mom uncomfortable. Dad's hand dropped into his lap. Aunt Susan tried to rescue the room. Families tease, sweetheart. Nobody meant harm. I looked at her. Then why did it only hurt one person? Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I could feel every year in my throat now. But I kept it steady. I own a business, I said. I have employees. I handle clients, payroll, insurance, schedules, complaints, emergencies. I bought my own home at 26 without asking either of you for help. And when you had bills and payments you were embarrassed about, I helped cover them because I thought that was what family did. Mom's eyes flashed. That is not something you need to bring up at this table. This table is exactly where it belongs, I said. Because this is where you keep shrinking me. Ryan looked at Allison. Allison was staring at Mom now. Not me. Mom, she said quietly. She's right. Mom turned to her like Allison had slapped her. Allison swallowed. You've done this before. And I let it happen because it was easier being the one you were proud of. The air changed, not softer, truer. Mom's face lost its polish. The hostess smile was gone, and underneath it was a woman who had run out of applause. I picked up my purse from the back of the chair. I'm not ashamed of my work, I said. I'm ashamed that I kept coming here hoping you would stop being ashamed of me. No one followed that with a laugh. I looked at the 14 faces around the table. If you want me at Thanksgiving, invite me as your daughter, not your punchline. Then I walked past the kitchen counter, past the pumpkin pie nobody had finished, and out the front door before anyone could decide how to make my pain about them. The cold outside hit my face before the tears did. I stood on my parents' porch with my purse hanging from my shoulder and my car keys pressed into my palm. Behind me, through the front window, I could still see the dining room light spilling over the table. Nobody was eating, nobody was laughing. My mother's house, which had always been loud enough to swallow me, looked frozen from the outside. I got into my car and sat there for a minute with the heat off. My hands were shaking now, not because I regretted it, because my body had spent 34 years learning how to stay quiet, and it did not know what to do with freedom yet. My phone buzzed before I reached the end of their street. Aunt Susan. I almost ignored it, but the message preview caught my eye. I'm sorry. I laughed because Linda laughed, and that makes it worse. I pulled over under a streetlight and read it twice. Then another message came from Cousin Megan. I didn't know you had employees. I'm sorry we made you feel small. Tyler sent one too. Short, awkward, barely a full sentence. But it was still more than he had said at the table. I drove home through Columbus with the radio off, listening to the tires hiss against cold pavement. When I unlocked my own front door, the quiet felt strange, not empty, clean. My kitchen smelled faintly like coffee from that morning. My work calendar was still open on the counter, covered in client notes and employee schedules, proof of a life I had built while my family kept pretending I was standing still. I took off my coat, placed my keys on the table, and cut myself a small slice of pumpkin pie from the second one I had bought for home. This one. Nobody mocked. This one. I ate standing barefoot in my own kitchen, with no one asking me to serve. Clean, smile, or shrink. Allison called later that night, for a while. Neither of us said anything. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. "I know you didn't make Mom say it," I said. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "But I let being chosen feel better than defending you. That hurt, because it was honest. She told me Ryan had asked her on the drive home if Thanksgiving was always like that. She said she had wanted to say no, but she couldn't. She promised she was going to talk to Mom and Dad, not for me, but because she didn't want to keep being used as a weapon." Dad called 2 days later. He did not have a perfect apology. Men like my father rarely do, but he said, "I should have put my glass down. It was small. It was late. But it was the first time he named what he had done." Mom called after that. She started with, "I never meant to hurt you," I said. Then, "Don't begin by defending the thing that did." There was a long pause. For once, I did not fill it for her. I told her I would not be coming to any family dinner where my work, my life, or my dignity were treated like entertainment. If she wanted a daughter at her table, she had to stop making room only for the version of me she could laugh at. She did not like that, but she heard it, and that was new. The next Thanksgiving, my chair at her table stayed empty, but mine, in my own kitchen, finally felt like it belonged to me. I used to think being invited to the table meant I was loved. Now I know better. Sometimes a family will save you a chair only because they need somewhere to place the version of you that makes them comfortable. The quiet one, the useful one, the one who laughs when the joke cuts too deep. I still love my family, but I do not confuse love with permission anymore if respect is only offered when I stay small. Then it is not respect. It is control with a tablecloth over it. There is nothing shameful about honest work. There is nothing dramatic about naming pain. And there is nothing cruel about leaving a room where people keep mistaking your silence for consent. So if you have ever sat at your own family table feeling invisible, I hope you remember this. You do not have to burn the house down to save yourself. Sometimes you just stand up. If this story hit close to home, tell me in the comments what you would have done, and hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. My mother still has that Thanksgiving table, but she no longer has my silence sitting at it.